Uh, Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Paul Sugarman, and I've sort of set up this group, the Citizen Advocate Network, as a way to sort of explore how to be a better advocate for others and also for ourselves as well. But there is just so much in this world that we can get really frustrated with. I mean, in terms of our justice system in this country, especially in the past week, there have been a lot of challenges in dealing with that. Looks to me like I've frozen now. I hope I haven't, but I'm just going to keep on going anyways. But and that there's issues that I think our citizens, our rights as citizens, in both collectively and individually, are often under attack. And as I've said, I'm going to start this off just sort of with my opening statement, and then for those who want to be panelists, I will promote them and be panelists. But first, I just sort of wanted to say that we're going, that I think there are some issues in terms of our rights as individuals that are sort of universal things and things on a sort of countrywide level that we should be able to agree upon to ensure that people have more rights. And one of the things, this is probably not really relevant to most of what we're doing, but just I feel the need to share my personal, well, I mean, there's a lot of frustrations with the Justice Department, but also just with the sort of federal power structure that gives lifetime appointments to judges and no term limits on Congress. I think that, I mean, there are a lot of congressmen who've been there for, or Congress people who've been there for quite a while, who are doing quite a good job. But I think that one of the reasons why the Constitution didn't originally have term limits is nobody sort of expected they'd be there that long. I mean, George Washington had 2 terms as president, and then he just, you know, that's enough. I'm out of here, you know. And I think that was the idea, and I think that that's become a problem in that there are people who just stay there forever, and so that they lose a perspective of what it's like for common citizens, and also they become more involved in the systems of government that they can't see as well what the problems are in many cases. That's what I feel. I also feel that it's unfair to have any kind of lifetime appointments for judges. I think judges end up getting a lot of power that's maybe not really deserved, or should be without limit, or should be without time limit, and so that's something. But as I say, I sort of think of this as advocacy as things that are on most of what I'm really concerned of is doing things on a practical local level to help people, and so I just wanted to acknowledge that sort of dichotomy, because I think that what we need to do is, in practical terms, is to be there to help others. I mean, in a certain sense, that just so that if we are there to help others, then hopefully somebody will be there to help us. I think that, as I said last week, I mean, that this sort of idea that we all have to be on our own is a fallacy, and that what we can do is we can reach out and help other people who need help, and also then we can get better at being able to express when we need help, and so we can do things, because I think that there's a lot of problems in terms of our healthcare system and our court system that if you just are on your own there, it's very difficult, and so I want us to be there for each other. So and so we're talking about this generally, and just the idea of Citizen Advocate Network. I like to choose it just as individual citizen, singular citizen advocate and network. And I mean, network implies a connection of things, but citizen advocate, I think, is talking about it as an individual, because we all have a choice as an individual as to what things we can do to try and help each other. And so that's why I put it together, and also because it makes the acronym CAN, Citizen Advocate Network, CAN, as in yes, we can, and that I want to keep it to practical things, to things that we can do. What can we accomplish? So that's what I wanted to talk about. I mean, there's advocacy, I mean, there's a lot of things that we need to do advocacy for police reform, for criminal justice reform. But as I say, I want to keep this focused more on the individual. So I want to talk about the sort of advocacy in healthcare, and also with advocacy in terms of dealing with the courts and things of that nature. Today, I think I'm going to try and sort of focus on a different topic, or some variations of it. But today, I want to focus on being a healthcare advocate. And Eleanor Elizabeth Foreman has very graciously agreed to sort of talk about some of her experiences with the healthcare, and also to discuss, so that we can discuss some of these issues and see what we can do better. So Eleanor, I see you're muted and your video is off, and there was also a message there's a blackout. So, all right. So yeah, so
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Well, I tried to turn the video on, but it's just showing black. So
Hmm.
I'm, I'm trying to be visible, but I seem to have failed.
Well, I found that a big challenge with Zoom on my computer, that a lot of times I can open up Zoom and then my video camera isn't working. And so I
Oh,
turn it off and restart. Oh, wait, I see a glimmering there. Is it that you don't have any light on you at all? Because I see your glasses, the reflection of your glasses there.
Okay, maybe it's simply because it's not well enough lit for you to be able to see me.
Yeah.
I don't have any light here.
Okay, so there is an actual blackout out there
Yeah, that's what I said.
yeah, no, you said it. I was wondering if it was like just a quick blackout or something like that. But anyway.
I am not sitting in the pitch black as the video would have it seen, but it's dim, very dark and dim.
Okay. Well, anyway, so I just wanted to see, to talk about, about what it is in terms of a healthcare advocate, and being and what you'd volunteered to talk about was in terms of some of your experiences with the healthcare system and how you really felt you needed an advocate. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to first start off mentioning an article that many of you may have seen in the New York Times about how the current treatment of COVID patients promotes their going into delirium. They are isolated from everyone, and the people who go in to treat them try to be there for as little as possible, and they're in hazmat when they're all covered up, and they don't have the contact with their family or friends either, and they might not be able to get the water they need to stay hydrated or other necessities because they might be even too confused to use a call button. And even if they use it, they're not going to be answered anytime soon. So I just would refer people to that. I'm concerned if I should go into the hospital, I would need help in having my wishes and my needs met. I don't want to get delirium and attendant post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, as for my previous experiences, I was in a motor vehicular accident where I had a severe knee injury, and I was in the hospital for 17 days, not because it was so severe that it needed 17 days of treatment, mind you, but I did need an operation, and I did need to be taught to use crutches because I was non-weight bearing. Anyone who has used crutches where you're able to put your injured foot down, this is you can't compare it. If you can't put your injured foot down, it's extremely tiring. And so anyway, I needed the lessons and I needed the chance uh, to build up the muscles. But then when I was fully able to use my crutches, the physical therapist the doctor told me, you're ready to go home. He signed off on me. But the physical therapist refused to do so because she said that if she signed off on me and I had an accident later, then she could lose her license. So she wanted to not sign off on me, uh, and therefore have me kept in the hospital for 3 months until I was no longer non weight bearing. So I was fighting to try to get home to my cats who needed food and water. And I was capable of living at home in isolation if I could only get there. But the thing about hospitals that many people don't understand, they say, well, if you don't agree with your treatment, you can just walk out. And you can if you can walk. If you're unable to walk because you have a broken knee or because you've just had a heart attack or a stroke or whatever it is, if you're not physically capable of leaving under your own power, the hospital will not help you. They kept my crutches locked up every moment I wasn't getting a lesson from a therapist on how to use them. You're not allowed access to crutches. You're not allowed access to a wheelchair. They make sure that the only way, if you can't walk out on your only alternative is to find a friend who would actually carry you out, which, lots of luck with that. So I was trapped. And because they wanted me to sign something saying that I agreed to stay for the 3 months, and they'd put me in this special ward where I would get more than a few minutes a day physical therapy. I'd get a lot more, but I still wanted to go home. So they wanted to send me, this was Bellevue, they wanted to send me to the 10th floor, which is where people are involuntarily committed. They wanted to commit me for a 3-day period where they would forcibly give me whatever medications they felt like that would mess with my mind, and then declare at the end of the 3 days that I was not competent to make my own decisions, and therefore have me committed to the 10th floor of Bellevue for the 3-month period, all because I simply didn't agree with their keeping me there. During this time, by the way, this time that I was fighting to try to get someone please go to my home and give my cats food and water, I was also molested by a male nurse. I was I was also, when did get home, I found a postcard in my mailbox. I had to go to the court to give my answer for why I couldn't be evicted. So if I had stayed even a day or two longer, I would have, when I came back home, I would have found that I didn't have a home. But I had, because I have weird biochemistry, I react unusually to a wide range of unrelated medicines. I have a psychopharmacologist who helps me with that. And I had in my medical records, I had had my regular doctor put in my medical records, and the psychopharmacologist backed this up, that involuntarily committing me would be contraindicated, because if I were deprived of my freedom, I would and could manage to find a way to find freedom by killing myself. So, it was not safe to put me involuntarily commit me, as many people are committed to prevent them from suicide, but in my case it would be the other way around. And so I got the psychopharmacologist to attest to them. She's competent. She's eccentric, but she's perfectly competent to make her own decisions. Even so, they wouldn't let me go. I had to call up the uh, the medical the doctor who's at the insurance place, who's paid to tell people, no, you can't have more treatment. I explained to this guy, I'm being given treatment I don't want and I don't need, and you're being asked to pay for it. Uh, he'd never heard someone tell him that they wanted less. It took me quite a number of attempts to get him to understand I was asking for less rather than more. But he agreed to back me up. He said, if we agree not to pay, you'll have to. I said, I don't have any money. There's nothing for them to seize. Uh, that's fine. And once the hospital understood that they would have to eat the cost of every day that they kept me there, they were eventually willing to listen to me say, if this person won't sign off, hire somebody else for a day or a half a day and get a different physical therapist to evaluate me and sign me off on me, which is what they did. So,
Wow. Wow, that's quite a story. And I mean, I think that really, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of that that's really very horrifying in terms of the way of not having your rights. But I must commend you. I think that really it was a very creative way that you were able to figure out a way to do this and to get them to change by being persistent. I mean, that I think that's the sort of thing that I think is the kind of thinking of, like, trying different ways, finding, I mean, that the insurance companies, which are responsible for so many of our sort of, well, in my opinion, problems with our healthcare system in this country, that it's just really amazing to be able to make an ally of them to get it to work. So I commend you for that, and I think that is a very good example of what advocacy can be like.
let me just add that if I had not had my full wits about me, if I had been being fed medications that would affect my mind, I couldn't have done it. Also, if I hadn't had a phone, I just by chance, that usually where I was, people had to ask to have a phone put in. They had to pay in cash. You have to have the physical dollar bills in your wallet when you're picked up off of the ground, and wait for someone to install it. For some reason, there was a working phone by my bed, which I hadn't asked for and hadn't paid for. If it hadn't been there, I couldn't have done this. And if I hadn't been fully competent, fully well, mentally well, I mean, not mentally sick, but if you have COVID, it's not like having a broken knee. It could affect your ability to think clearly. Just even a fever can do that to some people. So it could so easily have been that I had gotten out 3 months later and found someone else was living in my apartment, and all my belongings had been auctioned off because I hadn't been paying the storage company where they were carted off to. I wouldn't have had a coat for winter. Just the clothes that I was wearing.
We have a question about what year was the accident? Was this wasn't the one where you ran an accident on the way to an Instant Shakespeare Company reading, was it?
No, no, this was before then. This was in the year 2000.
Uh,
So what could an advocate do for you under those circumstances? I mean, let's say that you had made an agreement with a friend to advocate for you. Under those circumstances, how could a person help?
They could make the phone calls if I didn't have a phone and be persistent. They would be clear-headed when I might be feverish or be given medications that affected my thinking, or even COVID can cause strokes.
Right.
And also, the article that I read talks about how you prevent people from getting delirium. It helps for a person to have contact. If a person in the hospital can spend 20 minutes 3 times a day with someone they know, that will help keep them focused in the here and now.
Mm-hmm.
A person could act, a medical advocate could hopefully be given the power as a necessary worker to have access to the COVID patient when family and friends aren't allowed in. They could actually be in there and see the person in person and see how they're being treated in person. So family and friend, it's always true that if someone's in the hospital, that they need family and friends to be there, to visit, to make sure they're being properly taken care of, not just for COVID. But in this particular case, you would need to have a medical advocate with papers signed giving them the right to even go into the room.
How do you arrange that with COVID?
Well, I would contact Compassion and Choices, which is a group that advocates that people get living wills and have people who can make medical decisions for them. And I would also contact the ACLU or the NYCLU to see that my right to have a medical advocate able to go into the room. Either there's already something that you can sign to establish that, or there needs to be a legal case to establish that.
Yeah, well, I think there's also a lot of things where with COVID, there's still so much that we don't know, and they're trying to err on the side of caution in terms of keeping people away, even though it really is very bad for the patients. But I mean, it's also, we have issues with the large number of medical personnel who've been infected. So to have someone coming into there, that's challenging. And but it is necessary.
It might be that one might have to, at first, unless and until one's right was established for just anyone, perhaps it might have to be someone who had already had COVID. But
I mean, if they have more antibody testing, and not that antibodies will really tell us for sure, but it can at least be some sort of indicator that someone may be less likely to be reinfected. But yeah, it is such a, I mean, a broader issue where we have the things that the doctors and the powers that be are taking away an individual's choice. And that's, I find that really frightening. But I think that there's also, I mean, yeah, you're fortunate that you had a phone and that you were able to do it. But I think that we, maybe in the next week or sometime coming up, we should really delve into more about sort of living wills and advanced medical directives and those sorts of things, because we really, no one knows when the day of trial will come, when something will happen to us where we may end up in that situation. So
you should ask someone from Compassion and Choices to be at this.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And we'll look into that.
It's a shame. I put out invitations last night. You know, it was so last minute, unfortunately, but I put out invitations to green organizations and so forth, all and WBAI people, and you know, I guess it was just late last night. They find out it's today. It's too late. But hopefully next week we can get out the word further.
Yeah, well, I mean, I hadn't really sort of decided on a name for this till yesterday anyway. So, yeah, no, I realized this was very last minute. And so I thank you all who have shown up for this. And, but I intend to do it as a sort of regularly on Sundays for at least for at least some time. So to see what we can do about that and possibly have more structured conversations.
Eleanor, do you if you have access to the possibility of phoning that organization, the Compassionate Choices, is that what it's called?
Compassion and Choices.
Compassion and Choices. Can you start that ball rolling so that we can maybe get some direct? I mean, right now we know what the problem is very vividly, but we don't really have any sort of concrete steps to take towards the solution. I mean, the specific question is, if I am in if I am in a condition where I cannot advocate for myself in this COVID situation, how can another person help me? I mean, that seems like the very straightforward question.
That's something that I'm sure they can tell us exactly what the situation is in New York or any other state, but we're in New York. Marjorie is asking if on a ventilator for any reason one cannot speak to state one's wishes, an advocate can take the time to help tell the patient what is going on, then help them convey what they want to the medical staff.
Right, if you can get in there to do that. That's the question is how do you get access for your advocate in the COVID, well, in any situation, but particularly because we're dealing with COVID right now. How do you get an advocate in there for you? Is there some way, if the advocate can't be present physically, is there some other way? So I'm sure that people have been thinking about this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Paul just sent a message, raise your hand if you want to join the conversation. I think Marjorie will want to do that. I don't know if she saw the message.
Yeah. I'm going to promote to panelist, yes. Yeah, because there's all sorts of special things, but I think one of the other things about COVID-19 is that it's such an extreme, such a special case that it has made us more aware of some of these issues that are just generally part of the mix of what one has to navigate in our healthcare system. So, but I mean, yeah, I will reach out to them and try and have some more things. I've been starting to look into it a little bit, there are different sorts of like healthcare advocates where there's sort of a national certification and other sorts of certifications you can have to be a healthcare advocate, and also in terms of mental health care advocacy, which I think is looking at it in a sort of a broader sense of being an advocate for, I mean, better understanding of mental health issues and more constructive ways of dealing with them. Because also, quite frankly, I think that's one of the issues with our criminal justice system, is that because we have less sort of mental health support in this country than we really need, that people end up in prison because of those sorts of issues, and that it's generally not something I've seen as being particularly useful in dealing with that.
Tell me more what you were talking about, people being certified as mental health care, as healthcare advocates. What
Yeah,
kind of certification process do people have to go through, and can they go through it now when things are all shut down?
well, it was something I haven't looked into it very thoroughly. I've just sort of started to look at it. The board certified, I forget what exactly it's called, but they have sorts of things where you study and then take tests on it. And then also I think there may be some sort of aspect of sort of volunteering and working in some hospital or local healthcare thing, basically to be able to sort of navigate with dealing with the insurance issues, and being able to communicate between the doctor and the patient to help things be clear on what is the treatment that the doctor's advocating and how it should be implemented, and sort of serving as a go-between, both between patient and doctor, patient and insurance company, and just also, yeah, as a general advocate to make sure they don't just get lost in the shuffle. As we do, one of the aspects of our country, it's a very big healthcare system, and people are sometimes not kind of lost, you know, and that's why it's important to be there for people, and to also figure out how we can be there for others and have others there for us. And I think that a discussion with somebody from Compassionate Choices would probably be very helpful for that.
If this course requires one's going to a hospital, I don't think they're going to be doing it right now.
Yeah, no, I don't think that aspect of it. What I saw from the thing was talking about stuff where I think you have to like take an exam first, and the next exams aren't until September. And there are things, I mean, it's sort of weird. I mean, because there is actually a great need in the healthcare field, and but also how do you balance it? So, I think that one of the other issues that's also, I think, very difficult is to be able to talk about, I mean, your own issues, and to reach out to people to say, hey, I have this thing that I might need help with. And I think that's very difficult. And that is part of it, because if you have something where if you don't deal with it before the state becomes involved, then your choices can be greatly circumscribed by what the courts or the the healthcare system or whatever is doing. And so that's, I think that is another issue that
it's important to get the ball rolling, to get papers signed sooner rather than later. Because if we put it off week by week, when
yeah.
to go to the hospital tomorrow, the paperwork has not been done.
Well, have you made a living will? Have you made an advance directive?
I've signed such paperwork in the hospital before, but I do not have a copy of it, and I don't know where anyone would find it. So basically, I think it would need to be done again.
Yeah.
Uh,
I asked for such paperwork to be sent to me in the mail for me to fill out. Never got here.
Yeah,
well,
that's
might be worth checking that out again. Just looking for different sources. I believe AARP has some resources on that. But there are lots of online, not lots, but I have seen online um, resources for that. Now, you, I know, don't want a printer at your apartment, but so I don't know whether anyone is willing to mail out copies of this. Most of them say, here it is, print this out, and then fill it out, and you've got it. But you're going to have to find somebody who could pull that resource from someplace. I wonder if I could do that. I wonder if I could find a resource and just send you some blank forms. I could probably I'll look that up and see if I can.
Compassion and Choices would have everything.
Why don't you? How about this? You find the link for me.
Of course,
You send that to me. I will print it out and I will send it to you.
done. Or done as soon as the lights come back on.
Sure, sure.
yeah. Wow. It's yeah, no, there is a lot of things that we can do. And I think one of the other things why it's important to sort of have a network of advocacy, of advocates, is to be able to share this kind of information and to share information on other things in terms of what are things that we can practically do to help people. So and that one of I think that that there's a lot there's many things where you don't really learn how something works until after you've been through it once, until after it sort of happened to you, like it sounds like in terms of what Eleanor explained in terms of dealing with the healthcare system here in a way of just trying to get out of there, and how difficult that was, and that's really, and I think that there's the sort of useful tools that can be gathered from that in terms of having to be persistent, having to find other ways to get through to it if people are just giving you no. I mean, it's also, I think there's a certain element of, I mean, being a New Yorker in terms of if you're not getting what you want, then you're going to keep complaining until you get what you want, you know, and that unfortunately, I mean, or fortunately, that is the way, like with customer service, I mean, that sometimes you really have to be a squeaky wheel, to raise things up to the next level, to deal with a manager in order to get it, because they want to say no, because they just want to get rid of you. And you just can't take no for an answer if you can't take no for an answer.
And that is why I think it's important to have somebody, another person, or more, one or two other people who are keeping track of you enough that that they know what's going on, because at least then you can get somebody to be the squeaky wheel. If you can get through to the people that you have to get through to, that I think is, let's see what your Compassion and Choices people say about how to accomplish this, because it is something that really needs to be accomplished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's so many gatekeepers, and especially because I think from the way that a lot of the healthcare is structured around, I mean, paying for it in terms of insurance and those sorts of issues, that it's, they want to do the thing that's going to be the easiest for them, and in most cases cost them the least, and that sometimes isn't what's in the best interest of the patient. But yeah, I think being a squeaky wheel. I mean, I just had a thing just with recently with State Farm in terms of dealing with my I had a rental, a replacement rental for a little bit. And then they sort of like called me out of the blue one day. It's like, oh, well, it's all over. You should have brought it back like a week ago. And so we're going to charge you all of this. And then I sort of complained, and they said, no, that's it. It's like, well, no, let me talk to a manager. And so I finally got to a manager and explained the situation, explained what I'd been told. And they were like, oh, okay, we can do that. But it's like, if I hadn't fought for that, they would have been charging me for this other rental. So, I mean, that's why I say that it's like, and I think what Taylor was saying is very true in terms of having somebody else to be able to say that for you. Because a lot of times when you're in the situation where you feel your rights are gone, I mean, it can be such a difficult emotional thing to deal with that, I mean, you can react very strongly, which then can be used against you. So, I mean.
Yeah, and in this case, it is very probable that that being your own squeaky wheel may be impossible, because you might be physically incapable of being your own squeaky wheel. So there needs to be some way to have someone, I would say someone local, you know, as opposed to, I picture me trying to call a hospital in New York from across the country and say, where's my friend Eleanor? You know, it seems like you need someone there near where you are, so that if you can't get through on the phone, you know, you can have someone to go to the front desk and say, my friend is in this, you know, is in room 482. We need to do something about this.
Yes, I think that's a really very important point. That, yeah, how important it is for things to actually be able to have an impact, that you need to be local and be there, and that's how you can make an impact. But yeah, I'm trying to think how to sort of structure it. It's like, should it be like, if you have, I mean, just as and then, you know, never, I mean, people move away, people come back and forth, to maybe to sort of set up in some way sort of a network of support of advocates that was like sort of arranged in like about maybe like 4 or 5 people who sort of agreed to be there for each other. And so that they would each all be aware of each other's directives and needs, and so that there would be a thing. Although I wonder, in terms of the legal thing, if probably need to designate just like maybe, yeah, well, that's something else I'll look into, in terms of whether you can only designate sort of one healthcare advocate, or.
I know that on advanced directives, they usually allow you to select one person and an alternate. So and that could be. I like your idea, Paul, of having more than just, you know, one resource or even 2 resources. Having, you know, if you had 4 people in New York City who just sort of all agreed that they would be looking after each other, the details of that advocacy could be, I'm sure, could be ironed out in one way or another. You know, because so 2 names appear on this and different 2 names appear on that, however you'd work it out.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, because actually one of the sort of things where I was very much sort of impressed as to how this sort of kind of manifested itself is when our friend Barry Liebman from Instant Shakespeare Company, when he was very sick and was dying, and he really, I mean, I didn't get to see him until the very end, when he couldn't even really talk, but the place where he was, there were like 15 people there, because there were people there who were trying to do something to be able to work it out, and various of his close friends, one of them had been designated as the as his healthcare proxy or whatever, and so they were able to deal with these things. But it's a lot to deal with, and so it was really good that it was a group of people rather than it just falling on like one other person to do it.
But that was because Barry's was extremely popular, that he had all those people coming to his aid. People who are not popular, people who are unpopular, need just as much help.
Well
Yeah,
put.
actually, probably even more, and that is, yeah, that's why, I mean, possibly we need to think of a way of structuring these things so that people can be there for each other. So, hey, Kathy, do you have anything you
Hi.
wanted to contribute, or?
Sure. I just wanted to say that unfortunately, this COVID situation has presented some unique challenges. For example, just recently, I would try and call the nursing care facility where my mom was staying, and the staff was so overwhelmed and short-staffed that they weren't even answering the phone. So it just makes it difficult to advocate for somebody right now in that situation. And I'm sure the hospitals are overwhelmed, as one of my brothers works in an emergency room, and he said that they are extremely short-staffed at the moment. So that's just one of the challenges right now that's unique.
Yeah, yeah. There's all sorts of things that we're having to deal with in terms of dealing with things, which does make it even more difficult. Which I think is why it's even more necessary to sort of have these conversations and like so that we can deal with the broader issues and find ways to deal with it as things do seem to be moving, as we sort of start getting these sort of opening up and changes with things, but there's still a lot that hasn't been settled in terms of how to be able to safely treat people. So.
Well, thank you for having this forum.
Oh, you're welcome.
It seems like the first step is we need to learn what you need to have in place to allow someone to be your medical advocate. We've got to have that piece of information before we can take a next step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's what. Yeah, I see. I mean, this is the thing. I sort of have. I kind of started this not. More because of the fact that I have a lot of questions about it as of yet more than answers, and so that it's good to sort of to raise these questions and to see what we need to find more about, and then hopefully next week I can have some more information. Maybe we can have a guest from someplace like this to talk about these things, because I think that also one of the real benefits of having a will, a living will, an advanced medical directive is that it forces you to deal with these difficult conversations, because these are difficult conversations that you need to have, because I mean, we're all going to die, you know, and I mean, what's going to happen to us at the end, we sometimes don't know how quickly it might come on or whatever, but if we at least have some idea of how we feel we want to deal with it, that at least gives us some sort of power.
And it takes the stress off of someone who is making decisions for us if we've made those decisions. You know, if we've set what it is we would like done in this or that horrible event, it does seem like that does take some of the, you know, it's horribly stressful for someone else to do anything in those circumstances, but at least we've made the decisions so that the person's not guessing.
Yeah, no, I know that's how impactful that can be. I mean, when my mother-in-law died, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that she'd prepared, even down to like sort of details of what music to play at the service and all of those sorts of things. And it was great because then you knew that it was what she had wanted. And it was one less thing to have to deal with, because when you're dealing with those things, the details are just, I mean, so overwhelming. So.
I know when my parents moved to assisted living for the last 2 years of their lives out here, and I sort of gave them this kind of invitation. I said, well, I've gone with you to the place where your mother went when she was a little too old to take care of herself in Philadelphia. Would you rather go there and have me visit once every 6 weeks, or would you rather come out here where I could come over every day? In magic terms, that's called a force. Giving someone an apparent choice whose conclusion is so obvious that it can't be resisted. However, what
that
this
you
meant
were-
was that
yeah.
every day I was in town in Las Vegas for the last 2 years of their lives, every single day I went over and took a look. And you would be surprised. It was a very conscientiously run facility. It was quite comfortable. It was quite lovely. And yet, get a new caregiver in, and they don't know the medication regimen, and there can be problems. So the idea of having someone who can actually look at the circumstances and with whatever knowledge they have, at least raise questions. Shouldn't she have gotten an extra glass of water here? That's pretty important.
When my grandmother was unable to live by herself, at first my mother had her with her until my grandmother fell. She wasn't able to walk by herself, and she fell and knocked my mother over, and my mother was afraid that she would break a hip.
Mm.
So she felt she wasn't able to keep her any longer. So she went into a place where they tried to give you skills to what is it, after one's had minor stroke, to help you get back your skills. And
a convalescent sort of facility.
yeah, and then when she was no longer able to stay there because she wasn't making further progress, she went to a permanent home, which was a place that my mother visited every single day, and sometimes even she would visit twice a day. And that place was supposedly a good place, and yet it was dreadful. Uh, I was there once, and my grandmother's behind had not been wiped. And I was trying to do it for her, and it had gone so long, it was too painful for her to bear.
Mm.
And she fell out of her chair once, and they tied her to her chair. Totally illegal, but they did it anyway. And that's how my mother discovered her. And they were saying, well, we have to, because we can't let her fall out again. I was able to say, use a car seat driving wedge, put it the other way round to tilt her back. And nobody had been able to think of that idea. And this was a place that was supposedly an excellent place. She was the envy of everyone else in the institution because she had a daughter who visited her every day, totally unheard of. And then my grandmother moved to Baltimore. Everyone who knew my grandmother visited her once and never again.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, because it is, I mean, and I think there's also one of the things that we don't sort of acknowledge in our society is how difficult and how, I mean, to do good care, to provide good care for people who are in hospitals or in convalescent centers and other sort of care. And that is really, it's a challenge, and I think that even in the best facilities, you can still have someone who doesn't do their job very well, and sometimes you can have a person who's really great, even a bad one, who makes it better for people. But in general, I mean, I think that you make the good point that having some sort of involvement in seeing it, and of course, actually, this is another thing that was affected by COVID-19. I mean, that you couldn't even visit, and so there's a lot of challenges with that, and also a lot of things that we need to sort of value and put a value on taking care of people when they need the care. And that's sort of one of the things that doesn't get enough attention, and that how difficult it is, and to keep it ongoing, and even so that you're trying to make at least some progress on things. Well, anyways, in any event, I thank you for a lot of everybody for coming and for bringing up these issues and trying to deal with them. And I think there's been some really good suggestions in terms of getting a little more practical about this and explore different sorts of ideas as to how we can be there for each other and be advocates for each other. I think I want to try and keep these meetings to just about an hour. And so I want to sort of wrap it up, and then next week I think we'll have we'll see if we can get some sort of guests to join us about this, or if not, that I'll do some more research, and we'll have other sorts of materials to be able to share with people about this. And so, because I think it is really, we need to be aware of these issues, and we need to be open to helping each other and finding ways of doing that. And I think that's what we're about. Are there any other people who've got anything they wanted to add or feel we should mention here? Well, as Thomas More, silence equals assent. So I think that fortunately we've gotten a lot further away from that in terms of certain sorts of things today, but it is sort of a general comment, general way that things are. And that's why I think is being an advocate, is that if there's something that's wrong, we're going to raise our voice to try and protest it and try and do something about it. And that's why I think that we have to be aware of the power. And I think it's also that in our voices, by saying, no, this is wrong, let's come up with something better. May not know what the answer is, but this is wrong, let's come up with something better. And by raising your voice, you can hopefully change things and make things better for somebody who's in a vulnerable position. So, so thank you. As I say, thank you all for coming. And as I say, next week, we're going to focus more on terms of the specifics of being a patient advocate, finding out more about that, and in terms of directives, and how, and also in terms of what the legal things are, and then in terms of another way of possibly thinking how we can structure this in a broader way so that you can say, well, I'm going to be part of this group where I'll be aware of being an advocate for these 3 other people, and these 3 other people be aware of my situation and do that. So just think about that as well. And as we try and do things to be better advocates. Oh, I have one more.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And let people be aware that as I'm without power, and when my computer runs out of power, I will communicate that way.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, well, we're just wrapping up. I just see that Kenneth and Dolores have joined us. So hi there. I mean,
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Listen,
Ken.
as an idea, hi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ken.
As an idea for a future topic, to expand on the last thing Eleanor was speaking of, the past several years, with the health problems of my grandparents and parents, we have, it says my high CPU usage is affecting the meeting quality. Are you able to hear me? My internet connection is unstable.
The sound of your voice.
We have experienced a lot of, we've had a lot of negative. Yes, I'm not hearing you very well either. we've had a lot of negative nursing home experiences, and these were places that had very, very good reputations. And without being overly cynical, it's hard not to come to the conclusion that we're dealing with a very corrupt system. And nursing homes and hospitals and the court systems. And how do you hold these people accountable? Whom do you go to when things aren't? I'm not putting it very well.
No,
But is there anything you would like to say?
Yes, one of the things when I was in the hospital, I had a lot of difficulty walking around at the nursing home. And if I tried to get into bed by myself, it was a horrible struggle because I had a lot of pain in my leg. And I would really have to strain myself by trying to put my feet on the wheelchair to get into bed and really struggle. And when I would call for help, because I had to lift both legs at the same time, which I always didn't, and it caused me a lot of pain, they wouldn't come in. And then one of the aides said, "Oh, I watched you one day getting into bed." And I was so angry when she said that. She said, "You can get into bed by yourself." I said, I struggled so much doing that I would lie there for about 5 minutes out of breath. And I felt so bad. I said, if you saw me struggling, why didn't you come in to help? And anytime I would ring the bell, a lot of them would come in, turn the bell off, and not even ask me what I wanted. And they would go just streaming out. And this is a very fancy place, and they'll polish the floors 3 times a day, but yet when they bring the meals, which were terrible, just terrible, either too salty or too sweet, or even if it was chopped, it was just so hard. And also with the fancy warmers and everything, they were all chipped and broken and everything. It just seemed that they did everything to show that this place was so fancy, and it wasn't. And also a lot of problems with the physical therapy. They had me walking when I was in severe pain. And yet when I watched things on the computer, when I got home, a lot of the doctors, 3 different ones, were showing what exercises they did and rubbing certain liniments on the legs and just without the pressure of having to stand, how they did things on the bed or something. Yes, and there was one therapist, though, that just made me sit at the edge of the bed and do some exercises. But to walk on the knee, it made it a lot worse. And one time I had to get something that was around the other side of the bed, and I was holding on to the radiator in the bed. I couldn't stand up straight. And another time when there was a nurse in the room, a male nurse, and
okay,
I called
I'm
to him
Dolores.
busy, and he just walked out, and I did pass out on the bed. I fell backwards, thank God, but I was able to regain consciousness. So please, I need help. And also, I'm part of a medical family. My husband was a physician, and I was a medical lab tech, and one of my sons is an X-ray tech. And if I told
Yeah, well,
Paul.
yeah, there are a lot of difficult
I can't hear you,
issues and
I'm having
things like that, and I think we just need to,
Paul has been
yeah.
wonderful trying to help as an advocate. Paul,
Yeah. Well, and I think that's,
Can you hear us? Are we coming through?
well, we're sort of hearing you. We're not, at least for me, I'm just not seeing your, it's just sort of a frozen picture,
Yeah.
but I've mostly heard
Just
you,
wait
and
for
I was
time.
hearing that, but I think we really need to wrap up this meeting for now. And thank you. I mean, if the Waynes want to stay on for a little bit, we can talk a little bit more, but for the rest of you, you can just sort of leave, and thank you for coming.